Welcome. Thank you for joining us during Teacher Appreciation Month as we look to ensure teachers play a pivotal role in reimagining the teaching profession so it better serves students in a rapidly changing world. My name is Becky Trammell. I'm a special education teacher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I also am one of 18 teachers who created and analyzed E4E's 7th annual Voices for the Classroom Survey report. But more for me later. Right now I'm here to introduce a guest we're thrilled to have with us, Congressman Bobby Scott. Representative Scott has served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives since 1993 and currently serves as ranking member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce, where he works to advance an agenda that improves equity and quality in education. As chairman of the committee, he helped craft the 2021 American Rescue Plan, which provided $122.8 billion under the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, or ESSER Fund, the single largest federal investment in K-12 education in American history. In 2015, he was one of the primary authors of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which takes significant steps to ensure that all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, or zip code, have the resources they need to succeed in the classroom and beyond. Congressman Scott is one of the nation's leading advocates for public education, from birth to college and career. He understands the role teachers play in guiding students at every level, and we appreciate the support he has shown educators and the students we work so hard to serve. We're so excited to have Congressman Scott here with us today. To kick us off, I'll hand it over to you, Congressman.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you for all that the Educators for Excellence do, and particularly the report, because the evidence is extremely important. I just left the group, we were talking about criminal justice. I told them in criminal justice you really have a choice. You can follow the evidence and research, or slogans and sound bites. You can't do both. And if you follow the evidence and research, you can reduce crime and save money. Slogans and sound bites. You can help yourself get elected, but you're not going to do much about crime. And you've obviously decided to do the evidence and research in terms of education policy. So I want to thank you for everything you're doing, particularly coming up with solutions and not just complaining about the problems. There's just politically, there's a lot of people who are focused on complaining about the problem and actually getting credit for it. You don't need a solution, just complain. And everybody says, well, if they're complaining that loudly, they must be doing something about it. Not doing anything, just complaining. And we can't make just the complaints a solution. You have to actually come up with the solutions. We know one of the most important factors in good education is obviously the teachers. And the better teachers we have, the better education children can get. We also have teachers teaching in dilapidated schools. That's another problem that we know what the solution is. You just have to pay the bill. We're experiencing sharp declines in teacher workforce due to low morale, high job stress, increased teacher turnover, challenging working conditions without sufficient pay. If you look at what teachers are paid in comparable education and experience and competency, others in other industries make a lot more. And so we have to get, if we expect to attract the best and the brightest, we've got to do something about teacher salaries. And when you talk about teacher shortages and teacher quality, if you start with anything other than salaries, you're not having a serious discussion. So you also have to deal with those book bans and other things that just get you mad, but don't make much progress. The COVID-19 didn't help any of this, just added to the stress. You've got the culture wars and everything else, just adding to the misery. We have a job as members of Congress to equip educators like yourselves with the tools to help people succeed. We look forward to the findings. In 2024, 44% of the teachers reported that they're likely to remain in the teaching profession. That's 56% had another answer. That's not good, and that's actually worse than it was just 2 years ago. So it's imperative that we listen to the teachers so they can remain engaged, and surveys and reports like this are very helpful in focusing our attention. So we have a lot of work to do. I was very proud of the work we did in the American Rescue Plan Act. We put more money into K through 12 education than any legislation in the history of the United States. And we distributed it according to the Title I formula. So where poverty is the biggest factor, so most resources went where they were most needed. And one of the things we need to do, this was kind of airdropped in the middle of the school year. So you had your budget set, and this was just extra money so you could do things that you'd always dreamed of doing, but never had the money. And so with that extra money in the middle of the school year coming, we need to go around and see what people did. We did it through the process of what's called reconciliation, so we couldn't put all the strings we usually put on the money. But I made it clear that if anybody messed up the money, I'd try to get their name in the paper. One of them fixed up the football stadium, got their name in the paper. Others had summer programs, after-school programs, tutorials, weekends, and programs that allowed them to really help the students catch up. And you gotta catch them up quick because they lost about 2 years of education. If they're 10th or 11th grade, if they graduate, they'll have a permanently diminished education. So you gotta catch them up quick. You don't have that kind of time, and that's what that rescue money was all about. We also have to put money into schools, and we really gotta do it on a federal level. I think my nice state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia legislature passed voluntary local option to raise taxes to build schools. It was vetoed by the governor because he didn't want to, he had some pledge he made about raising taxes. So the idea that you're going to get sufficient money on the local and state basis to raise the salaries, I think it will happen. We need to do something on the federal level, and we can. It's within our capabilities, and we need to put some money in there so we can do something about the schools. I know in Virginia, it's 40 or 50 years is the median age of the schools. Some may be worse, some may be better, but you're not going to get much involved in that. We've got the administration here working hard to make sure that they do everything they can, but if they don't have the money from Congress, you know, they're limited in what they can do. But the survey that you have will give us the evidence and the focus on what actually needs to be done. And that's why I'm delighted to be here, and I look forward to the publication of the results so we can get to work. Thank you so much.
Well, that's a great way to get us started. Thank you very much, Congressman Scott. My name is Evan Stone. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Educators for Excellence, and I still think of myself as a 6th grade teacher from the Bronx. And we have a really exciting program planned for you today. Because this is Educators for Excellence, we're going to start with the voices of teachers reflecting on this really critical data. They're going to tell you both what the data is and what their lived experiences in their classrooms are that reflect that data. Then we're going to bring up Assistant Secretary Rodriguez, who will give his reflection from the Federal Department of Education, and then Carrie Rodriguez and Kevin Urban, who are going to give us reflections from parents and students who are impacted by our schools. Hopefully, this will give you a glimmer into what this data really means for teachers across the country. But as a quick reflection, when I looked at this data, which is a national sample of over 1,000 teachers, the things that jumped out at me were really clear. First, as Rep. Scott said, we have a nation of schools that is in crisis. Both teachers are telling us that their schools aren't serving their students. The vast majority of teachers are reporting that their kids are both behind academically and they have deep concerns about their mental health. Teachers are also telling us that the schools aren't working for them, that their own experiences as educators in the building is not setting them up to feel sustained, are not setting them up to feel successful, and is not setting them up to feel like they're serving kids. So this data should be concerning to us. But the other thing I saw in this data was a clarion call for change and a roadmap for where teachers want to go. What teachers are saying is they want a more dynamic, more collaborative, a profession that is more rewarding and sustaining. They're looking to move away from a model of education that is no longer working for them or for their students. One that creates more dynamism, more collaboration, more engagement, more excitement around learning. That's what we all want to see for our students, and that's what teachers want to be working into as their environment. So why now? Why are we releasing this survey now? Well, first, last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, but at E4E we know a week is not enough to honor and celebrate teachers, so we make it Teacher Appreciation Month. And so we are here to make sure that teachers' voices are driving the conversation as one way to appreciate and respect them. The second reason we're releasing this now is what Congressman Scott just talked about. We are at a huge inflection point in our schools where we have this massive influx of federal dollars that is ending. Dollars that help students recover, that move the needle in buildings across the country. And schools are not prepared for how to sustain the change, to sustain the work that's been going on without that money. So we need to be thinking really broadly about how do we help teachers, how do we shift conditions in buildings, especially as we see this reduction, the significant reduction in federal funds. The third reason we're here today is this Friday is the 70th anniversary of Brown v. Board of Education. And that was a clarion call for equity and justice in our education system, and one that has not been heard. Our schools are or more segregated in many communities as they were then. Our student disparities and gaps are as large as they've been in decades. And so our schools, the federal investment in our schools was meant to drive equity, and it has not delivered on that change. And so we're here to raise that conversation that's very clear in this data. And finally, we're here because of what Rep. Scott said. We have a polarized political landscape. And the conversation that's coming in this very critical election season is not reflective of what teachers want us to be talking about. So hopefully this data can shift the conversation away from polarizing politics towards the actual meaningful changes that teachers need and students want. So that's what I saw when I reflected on this data. Now I'm going to tell you just a little bit of the methodology of where this data came from. So this survey was developed by our National Teacher Leader Council, many of whom you'll hear from today and many others who are in the room. This is 18 educators from across the country who have been giving their nights and weekends and a trip to New York to dig into this data to help shape these questions, hopefully having a lot of fun along the way. It is a nationally representative poll, meaning it is not of Educators for Excellence members, it is of our national workforce, and it is really representative of teachers across the country. That's represented by age, by race, by grade level taught, by region of the country. And then in addition to that, we do an oversample of 300 educators of color, 300 BIPOC teachers. Because over the last 7 years that we've been doing this survey, we've seen a growing divergence in the perspective of our national sample and teachers of color. And so we want to shine a bright light on what our educators of color are saying they want and need in our schools. So this survey does a really, I think, good job of highlighting those differences. So that's a little bit about the methodology and the data behind this. And now, to really get us going, I'm going to call up a few educators to tell us a little bit about the data. So first, you already met Becky, but Becky's going to come back up and join us. Janelle Faulkner, who's a high school biology teacher in Boston. Susan Providence, who's a third grade teacher from St. Paul. And Dan Gannon, who's a high school social studies teacher from Westchester, New York.
All right, I guess it's me, sorry. We are going to start with teacher perspectives on how their students are doing academically and emotionally. Teachers report that students are still reeling from the effects of the pandemic. 70% of teachers say their students are behind academically, and 64% say their students' mental well-being is worse when compared to before the pandemic. Though this marks an improvement from prior years, the majority of teachers continue to report setbacks. Unsurprisingly, this perception of student outcomes aligns with teachers' perceptions regarding how their schools support students. 93% call inequitable funding in their district a problem, indicating that funding is not being strategically directed toward the students who need it the most. Only 23% of teachers believe that their school very effectively meets the academic needs of all of its students, including the unique needs of individual student subgroups. This is something that I deal with as a teacher in North Minneapolis. After the pandemic, we already have a lot of students with a lot of trauma and with things that are happening in our community and around. And with the pandemic, that seems to increase with mental health needs. We have quite a few students who have needs that are really beyond what we can provide. And I've even had students that have went to day treatments and partial hospitalization programs and got kicked out of there and came back to us, and it's our problem to deal with. And usually that's the outlier, but not anymore. We have about 3 to 5 students in every grade that have these significant mental health needs. So I've had to end, like as a special ed teacher, I pull small groups. I've had to end those groups to make sure that my students are safe. So they're missing out on their education. I think that's something that's really valuable to think about with our students and how they're dealing with the pandemic. Our older students, like I work with 3rd and 4th this year, they haven't learned how to do school. So the things that they learned in kindergarten, you learn in kindergarten and 1st grade, our kids don't know how to do those things. They don't know how to sit down. They don't know how to learn on their own. They're very much developmentally behind because they miss those times. On top of that, I have students this year at the beginning of the year, 4th graders, who came into 4th grade not reading at all. We're talking not even CBC words, right? We just finished learning our alphabet, letter names, and sounds with fluency. I have the staff stability to where I've been with this group of students since 1st grade. And the growth that group of students has made is astronomical. They've made about 3 years of growth in reading and math. So they're just below grade level. But that's because we have invested in our special education program at our school. My principals made that decision. And we've had to cut other things. We are cutting a teacher in every grade again this year. So the amount of support we can give our students keeps decreasing. But what we're seeing is that if we have the supports in place, our students can learn and grow and really love school and love learning. And that's the problem, is that we don't have the money federally, state, our districts. We always are going back and forth with the strike. And we just don't, the district says we don't have the money, the union says we do. We're struggling, right? And all I care about are my students, right? I'm not worried about anything but what my students need. And that's something that's really a struggle. So I'm gonna pass it to Janelle, and she's gonna share some more information.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janelle Faulkner. I'm a high school biology teacher in Boston. I'm on the other end of that side where we really struggle to get the kids out into the world. You know, they're seniors I'm looking at, I'm like, I'm not sure how this is gonna go. We try to get you to the finish line as best as possible. But, you know, coming into high school online, they weren't necessarily doing everything they needed to do. They weren't necessarily on the Zoom, right? There were lots of blank screens that I was trying to teach you, like, hello, unmute, you know. We've gotten all the way to, you know, graduation, and we're trying to get you to, you know, go out in the world and, you know, follow your dreams, and I'm not sure how prepared they are. The second theme is kind of talking about the low morale that teachers have. And that's a part of it, right? I feel like I am chipping away at something that's just getting bigger every year. Especially if supports are going, if you know you're being told to do more with less time, with less supports. You're as a teacher, like I am passionate about what I do. I am motivated. I want to see the best for my students. I kind of see them as being on Team Faulkner, and we got to all win. You know, like whatever winning looks like to my students. But because it's getting more and more difficult to do the things that I know will help them make progress, it's, you know, I'm looking and I'm kind of going, what am I doing, right? Am I able to really sustain this? Am I able to keep doing this long term if I'm not seeing the return on my investments? Only about 16% of teachers would recommend the profession to others. It is tough. It's a tough job, right? If someone asked me right now, should I be a teacher? I'd have a lot of yes, but also think about all these things. I don't want to sell you a pipe dream and have you a year in go, what did you have me sign up for? You know, you can get through it, but it's difficult, and there might be other avenues that, you know, you might be making some, having that same support with students without having to stress yourself out and pull your hair out and just, you know, go through this really difficult task. Less than half report that they're very likely to stay in the profession for their entire career. I work in a building with educators who are like, they're 20, 25 years in, they're trying to get to that 30 mark. I first heard that number and went, 30 years? Okay, I'm close to 10, I guess. I don't know if I'm gonna make 30 years, right? And for them, like, that was the thing. They got in, they're there, they're gonna get to this retirement point, and I'm not sure if I can do that. Like, I know maybe next year, I don't know, but at some point it might become too much, it might become too stressful. I might have to choose myself at some point. But it does kind of diverge from teachers of color. And as a teacher of color, I did see this data and go, okay, I want to meet these people. There are teachers of color who are kind of saying that they have more, their morale is a little bit higher than the average teacher in the States. They are kind of seeing some progress. My assumption is probably these folks have built themselves good communities. Like when I'm in a school and I have a good community around me, I have other teachers I can lean on, that really does help build my morale, it helps to push me forward. It makes me think, okay, I can do this, I can keep going. So most likely those folks might be in situations that they've carved out for themselves. They have that support, they have supportive admin, they have supportive parents. Maybe they're entrenched in the community and so they have that connection with the students, and they might be able to kind of push themselves forward. But on average, nationally, most teachers would agree, like it's tough. We're doing the best we can, but the outlook does not look very good. I will, I believe, pass to Susan to continue with other themes.
Well, good morning, and my name is Susan Providence. So my own is collaboration. Well, in order for anything to happen effectively, it's really hard to do it in a vacuum. You cannot do anything by yourself. And teaching should not be done by yourself. It's too hard of a job for one person. And so the importance of collaboration is a must. Teachers are calling for more collaborative time. I mean, especially in the field we're working on, we have so many. We have the EL student, we have the special ed student, we have the gen ed student, we have the speech student. So it's really impossible to do this job by yourself. So the importance of collaboration has to be a must for us to be effective in which to bring about change in education. 63% of teachers reported wanting more collaborative time with other teachers, making it the most popular activity out of all the 13 options. Collaboration is a must. Approaching it, making the profession more collaborative is one of the dynamic strategy of school staffing. Redesigning the role of teaching, and I think we really we thought after the pandemic, we will just reimagine it, we'll do something different, but we didn't. We went back to the same way of doing things, which makes it really hard because we really thought it was a really perfect time, the perfect storm to redesign it and to make it different. But we can't do it alone. We need to have the time where teachers are able to sit down and meet with one another, meet together as a group, and to really look at things through the lenses of a student. What is it that the student needs? And the student needs to be at the focus of the collaboration. Not just what teachers need, but we are looking about what students need. 50% of the teachers are open to that idea of collaboration. And 31% of teaching teams saying that they are in favor of it as well. Again, teaching is a team teaching model in which class sizes will, some of them said that they will even do the class sizes increase if collaboration is offering. 90% of teachers are willing to add students to their class if they're able to increase the exchange in terms of collaboration, if given some extra prep time where teachers can meet together. So teachers have a willingness to want to try a new approach if we are open to give them that opportunity. Currently at my school, we have a student named Johnny. And Johnny came, he has one of the most he's very behind, he struggled a lot. And so in a way, but the special ed teacher and the general teacher are never able to meet where they can talk about the progress Johnny made. So Johnny got 2 sets of work, one in his general ed classroom, one in his special ed classroom. That's not an effective method for Johnny. So Johnny needs his teacher working together in which to help work to bring about change that is best for him. So, so let's work together. Let's find policies that can help, funding what might be necessary to help the gen ed teacher and all those teachers working together to help bring about change. I'll pass it to Dan.
Thank you, Susan. Good morning. My name is Dan Gannon. I'm a 14-year teaching veteran of social studies in a high school setting, currently teaching in Westchester County at a small high school. I'm here today to talk about unions and what our teachers are saying about the power of unions and how we can continue to use that power to implement changes that we need. As teachers call for a reimagined and more effective profession, it is worthwhile to take stock of how much they believe the current unions have helped us with that transformation. While still positive, teacher satisfaction with unions' efforts to address bread and butter issues, kitchen table issues, like salaries, improved working conditions, is diminishing. And satisfaction with efforts to transform a profession is at an all-time low. On the issue of pay, 52% of teachers believe unions do an excellent or a good job in negotiating for higher salaries. However, that number is down from 64% in 2020. While this particular result does represent a slight majority, teachers are expressing some dissatisfaction with how their unions are negotiating on issues related to their salaries. As we heard earlier, that's the beginning of where we have to start this conversation. Next, the results of the survey show that only 1/3 of current union members report being very satisfied with their union's negotiating priorities. The profession has been evolving at a rapid pace, and teachers are beginning to realize that we need our union leaders to step up and meet that challenge and meet that evolution. Through the survey, less than a majority of teachers expressed satisfaction with their union's roles in helping facilitate a reimagining of the profession. I'm going to touch on 3 specific data points. 45% of teachers report satisfaction with their union's efforts to negotiate new ways to meaningfully and effectively evaluate teachers. 44% are satisfied with their efforts to provide support and the mentoring of new teachers, and only 38% are satisfied with the efforts to expand career ladders for teachers. This data indicates that we are looking for our union leaders to help us raise this profession, which I feel passionately about on a personal level. I've been a proud union member my entire 14-year career. I firmly believe in the power of our collective voices. It is this experience that gives me confidence to know that our unions working together can make the improvements that you're seeing in the data that we need. I know from experience the burden of having a contract that is outdated and a slow model for salary progression. It shouldn't have taken me 14 years and more personal financial investment to earn a wage that barely meets the real world living expenses. As a new dad, I also know the burden of a contract of a paternity leave policy that gives a new parent 10 days until they must choose between return to the classroom or finding childcare, which gets me a little emotional. And just so you know, for parents not out there, childcare today across communities all around America costs more than what we make monthly. I'm also married to a teacher, so we're feeling this doubly. How can we continue to help shape America's future students and kids, and we can't take care of our own? Exactly. I also know from experience that our future teachers are looking at us at this moment. I had the opportunity this year to work with high school students who want to be future teachers, and we have these conversations. We have to talk to our future teachers in a real sense, in a real world setting. And honestly, I don't know if this contract that we have to work under is fair for them. And I tell them to keep fighting, keep striving. They should be watching this. Hi, kids. But we need to do better for them and encourage them to see that there's a path forward for them, that they can have the lives that they want to lead and impact the kids that they want to impact like we've been able to do throughout our careers. At this point, I'd like to pass it back to Susan.
Well, one of the other areas that we want to talk about is was the science of reading. The teacher reported that in their district that have adopted the instructional material aligned with the science of reading. but that better support the training are needed to truly shift literacy instruction. 61% of teachers say that their district has implemented a new curriculum, and that is new in St. Paul. This year we have a new math, we have a new reading, we have a new writing curriculum, and very, very little training to go along with that. But only quarter of the teachers say that their district has very effectively supported implementing these material, and that these new material has shifted their instructional practice. Because there's just not enough time for them to master it while they're going into classroom, that they have to teach it to students. So in Minnesota, the READ Act has passed, but it wasn't fully funded. It's not fully funded. And so the lack of support for it. And so again, we watch the movies, we invite the parents to come and see that their children is not reading at grade level. We were even given the t-shirt to wear. But yet, at the same time, it's not fully funded. So we need more training. So without reading, it's truly hard for students to assess the material, especially in math. I mean, this year the math curriculum is very aligned with a lot of language. And so at one point we used to say, well, it's about the math, but even now that has changed. So children need to be able to think critically, so they must learn how to read. And so therefore, recently there has been a lot of cut across the district because because the fund has expired. So again, the reading must be done. So please, if there are funding, what are some of the things that we can do in which to help our young people, because they're really falling behind in the area of reading. I'll pass it back to Dan.
Thank you, Susan. Our next theme relates to artificial intelligence, which seems kind of weird to talk about in an education setting, but is very real for us teachers up here and our students. Teachers express a mix of curiosity and hesitancy about the issue of using AI in their classroom. So we definitely do see a need for training in this area. 17% of teachers report they are already confident in their ability to leverage AI. Nearly 2/3 want additional training on how to apply it in their teaching. Additionally, we see in the survey data that teachers of color already overwhelmingly support the technology's use in the classroom. More than half believe it has the potential to transform teaching and learning in a positive way, compared to only 14% of teachers nationally. And 56% report that they are already confident in their ability to leverage AI and don't need additional support, compared to just 17% of teachers nationally. So as we see, this is something new. It's, again, the profession evolving, and we need training and support from that. At this point, I'd like to pass it back to Evan. Thank you.
All right, can we get around? Thanks, y'all. I'm going to come back to the teachers in a minute. But I hope what you heard there was a very clear representation of the challenge that's in front of us, but also a pathway to change. That if we can slow down, create the space, the time, and the resources to allow us to radically rethink what schools look like, we will both make it more sustaining and dynamic for teachers, and will drive the outcomes and the equity that our students deserve. So now we're going to have reflections from a few of the key voices on these issues, first starting with the Federal Department of Education, and then we're going to hear from both parents and students. So I'm really excited to introduce you all to Assistant Secretary Roberto Rodriguez. I'll call him Roberto if that's okay, Assistant Secretary. Roberto has been in this work for a long time. He leads the Office of Planning, Development, and Policy at the Federal Department. Prior to that, he was the CEO of Teach Plus, an amazing partner organization that's elevating the voices of thousands of teachers on many of these same issues. And prior to that, he was working in the White House in a critical moment, shaping federal education policy. So, Roberto, thank you.
Hi, good morning. It's great to be here with you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Educators for Excellence for their work. Thank you, Evan, for your leadership. The mission behind E4E is one that's really close to my heart. As Evan mentioned, I previously led a national nonprofit that also focused on teacher leadership. And, you know, thinking about how we elevate and empower our teachers' voices to impact and influence policy change is so critical to the future of our country, critical to the future of teaching and the teaching profession. E4E does such a fantastic job to that end, and so thank you for bringing those voices from our schoolhouse to here to the halls of Congress. I'm really pleased to be here and to join you today. Thank you, Becky, Dan, Susan, Janelle, for your insights. Thank you for all you bring to our students every single day. Thank you for taking time from them to be with us here in Washington. And thank you for helping to share your wisdom on the path forward. Our policy making here in Washington, D.C. is incomplete if it doesn't include the lived experiences of our educators, period. Right? If we're talking about what's happening in our schools, in our classrooms, in our systems, that has to be front and center. Voice from the Classroom is a particularly valuable tool because it harnesses those voices from the field and helps us better distill and make sense of those lessons in terms of how we think about addressing so many of the challenges that we face today. And the insights that we just heard mirror a lot of the feedback and connections that we've recently heard at the department that I had the opportunity to hear coming off of Teacher Appreciation Week, from our National Teachers of the Year, from our exceptional and accomplished teachers from around the country who've shared their experiences in real time with us about what they're experiencing, how they're experiencing their work, the profession at large, the challenges, the future of how we think about education. And there is no doubt that we are in a challenging time, right? We are contending still with the impacts of a unprecedented disruption in our public education system that was the pandemic. We are contending with the increasing mental health needs of our students, the work to help accelerate their academic achievement. We just had a conversation yesterday at the White House about how we re-engage our young people and help to support their attendance. We have over 4 million young people who are chronically absent in our schools. We can't reach them if they're not in their seats and with our teachers. We know that those mental health challenges also extend to our educators. We know that we are in a dynamic time and age in our society, one where our economy is being reshaped every day by huge investments and new policies here at the federal level, policies that the president has helped to put forth to transform our economy into a digital economy, an innovation economy, a clean energy economy. So the demands for how we educate our young people to meet that charge also shift and change. So, all of those challenges are the backdrop around the conversation that we're having today, which is how do we think about responding to these needs in a way that really helps us to transform and meet some of the challenges that we're seeing our teachers facing every day. I think one of the important backdrops behind the insights you just heard from our fantastic teachers is that resources do matter, right? We have a $130 billion investment in the American Rescue Plan that Congressman Scott referenced. That is the single largest investment we've seen in education, necessarily to help us contend with some of those challenges of the pandemic. And we know that districts are using more than a quarter of those dollars to support educators, including recruiting and retaining and developing our teachers. We're encouraged by that, but we know that we have to do more, right? We have to do more to address some of the staffing shortages that we've seen in our schools. Putting those dollars to work, we've actually been able to level out, and we have even more full-time staff in our schools than we did prior to the pandemic. So that is an encouraging point. We know that our social workers and our school psychologists and the dollars that we've put forth through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act have started to take shape at the local level. But we still have a teacher shortage, right? And so we have to ask ourselves why. And I think some of the data that we look at today further illuminates that. We're trying to do more to make sure we're putting the federal dollars to work that we are stewarding at the U.S. Department of Education. That's $2.7 billion, even more in terms of how we're supporting our teachers. And we've increased those dollars by over $110 million just over the course of our administration. That means we have 34% more resources to put toward pre-service teacher preparation earlier in the pipeline to support some of those evidence-based and innovative approaches we know work in teacher residencies and grow your own programs. We're working with states to help establish new teacher apprenticeships that are learn and earn models that will help attract a new generation of teachers into our profession and put those to work in a way that's more easy, more accessible to invite them into the classroom, to invite them into considering teaching. We're putting 28% more into our IDEA programs to help support our special education teachers in that pipeline. We're doing more to help support our multilingual and our bilingual teachers to help address the Secretary's vision of making America multilingual, doing more to help support that as a superpower for our students. We're doing more to lift, for the first time ever, investments in the Hawkins Centers of Excellence program, and I want to thank Congress for their important investments to help support the pipeline of our teachers at our historically Black colleges and universities, our Hispanic serving institutions. These are institutions that prepare over half of our teachers of color, and for the first time ever, we're investing more in helping to support that pipeline. But we know it also, in addition to those resources, we need to undertake the policies that matter around supporting our great teachers, right? And Secretary Cardona talks a lot about this and about the ABCs of teaching, right? Agency, better working conditions, competitive compensation. How do we as a country raise the bar in how we address the working conditions that our teachers are facing every day? How do we provide more accessible pathways that are high quality into the profession, like the ones that I mentioned? How do we think about induction and mentoring and those early years that are so important to our teachers' growth and development and success? We know from all the research that if our teachers can be successful in those early years, we have a better chance of retaining them and helping them grow in the profession moving forward. And how do we think about the teacher leadership and advancement opportunities for our teachers to lead beyond the four walls of their classroom, for them to lead alongside their principals and thinking about how they shape curriculum, how they shape teaching, how they shape culture and climate in schools, how they shape the policies that matter as they come into the classroom, right? And so much of that is around the finding that sticks out for me from today's results, which is that, just a quarter of our teachers believe that their job is a dynamic job that provides them the opportunity for growth, the opportunity to collaborate. We have to do better. Right? We have to reimagine. You heard this from the panel. You heard, the pandemic disrupted so much of the world of work. Coming back in, we had high hopes that we'd be able to help support our teachers to think about how that opportunity is a silver lining for them to grow and lead and learn and connect in new ways versus pre-pandemic. And for so many of our teachers, that hasn't materialized. Right? They're still in the same structure and with the same norms and without the opportunities that they need to grow. If we don't provide those opportunities to grow, we are compromising our future further down the road. So for me, that's one of the most powerful findings of this, of today's report. I will say, I think we also have to look very closely at this issue around EdTech and around AI. I'm glad that we're having that conversation here because I'll tell you that is in the lives and in the learning of our students in major ways. We've released a new National Education Technology Plan. I want to encourage everyone to check that out at ed.gov. In February, we put that forth, and it includes examples of the dynamic use of technology to help support student learning across all 50 states. We're calling on a new national effort to address the digital access divide, the digital use divide, and the digital design divide. Most importantly, around how we center the educators' voices and experiences at the heart of that work. Our teachers and our students experience, on average, 158 different ed tech tools in their learning over the course of a year. It's a lot, right? And we have the advent of technology, advent of AI, and a new blueprint we've put out last May around artificial intelligence and the future of teaching and learning, to think about what are the principles we need to put in place to help support and empower our educators to use those technologies in ways that maximize results and potential for learning and for individualizing and supporting student success, and minimize the risks around privacy, safety, security for our students. But one thing is clear, which is that the voices and the vision and the experience of our teachers has to be centered in that debate, has to be centered in that enterprise. And that's something that our department is working very ardently toward. So I want to just close. I want to thank you for the chance to be here and to share some of my reflections, and I really look forward to the further conversation we're going to have this morning. I'll turn it back to Evan. Thank you.
Great. Now we're gonna, one of the things I think is really important in this conversation, E3 works to elevate the voices of teachers, and we know that that is one important voice, but it is incomplete if we're not bringing together teachers, parents, and the voices of students. So I'm thrilled that we're gonna welcome Carrie Rodriguez, who's the CEO of the National Parents Union, or the Mom in Chief, as she's affectionately known, to join us in this conversation, and Kevin Urin, who's the CEO of Our Turn, that works to elevate the voices of students. So I'm gonna invite both of them up to give some reflections. And then we're going to open it up for a conversation that's going to be led by some student fellows, some recent graduates, who will be framing questions for both teachers and all of us on these issues. So we'll start with Carrie. To share what you thought about this data, what it made you think about for your constituents.
Well, it made me feel wonderful and terrible at the same time. Because I'm here to report that, American families are united in terms of our frustration, in terms of what we're seeing. We're afraid about whether or not our kids are making adequate academic progress. A lot of the data that we are seeing reflected when we ask parents around what they're concerned about is very similar to what we're seeing from our educators in this report today. So, that is comforting to know that we're not alone in our concerns and our worries and our frustrations. But we're also united in hope, because no one here is willing to give up and throw in the towel. We have a vested interest in the success of the American public education system. And what I'd like to say today is that, this is a beautiful opportunity for us to link things together and be a united front on this. What was most striking to me is the fact that, from our data and our surveys, 2/3 of American families want to reimagine what is happening in classrooms. We want to innovate. We want new technologies. And frankly, we're frustrated that we're hanging on to this, 190-year-old model of how we deliver public education. Like, it's 2024. It's time to do things differently. And that's the beautiful thing that we saw as a result of the pandemic. We had to kind of just be the engineers of ingenuity here in our own living rooms. And so I think this is a beautiful opportunity for us to raise our voices collectively together as a united front to say, it's really time to radically change how we approach this. But, as the Assistant Secretary was saying, we were just at the White House yesterday talking about chronic absenteeism and the crisis that we're having in this country. And, I think these issues are so interconnected, because if the grown-ups who are in the building are frustrated and they're feeling unfulfilled and they're not engaged, how do you expect us as parents to have confidence in sending our kids into the classroom? I mean, we're emotionally intelligent, our kids are emotionally intelligent, and frankly, I think right now we're sending a very strong signal that, our system is sick, and it's time for us to get together collectively to make some real change.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Kevin, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you saw in this data.
Definitely. So I get the privilege of leading an organization called Our Turn, where we activate young people to ignite change and catalyze a national movement to heal and liberate both current and future generations of students. And I discussed this data with many of our fellows across the country, as far northeast as Vermont and as far to the sort of west and south as Texas. And the sort of clarion call was clear and echoed what teachers have said and what has been said here today, that the business of education definitely needs a dramatic overhaul. Students see, experience, feel, internalize the challenges that their teachers are facing. They witness the dedication, but also the overwhelming workload that teachers face and their limited resources. They understand the need for a system that's built for the future, not the past of 190 years ago, and they really want change. They told me, hey Kevin, you got to give these 3 points here. So firstly, they want teachers to actually be supported, not swamped. They want to imagine a world where educators have the time and resources to truly guide them, not just manage them. Students believe in investing in technology, resources, and innovative teaching methods that empower teachers to ignite student potential. Secondly, they really yearn for true partnership. We talked about collaboration teacher to teacher. They actually yearn that collaboration students to teachers, where students see educators as more than just instructors, but as mentors and as guides. They really envision a system where collaboration flourishes holistically and where student voices are valued and heard. This partnership, they believe, will ignite a powerful learning environment where both students can thrive, but also teachers can thrive. And that can only happen when the system creates true partnerships with teachers. If teachers aren't valued in that partnership with the system, then how can teachers value their students and see them as partners? And finally, the way that they learn needs a super major upgrade. Textbooks definitely have their place, but real world skills are essential, and as the Secretary shared, AI is moving at light speed. Students crave hands-on projects, collaboration and technology where their creativity can flourish. They envision incorporating AI as it is a part of the future, and far too many school lessons in our classrooms don't feel future focused. This is the future of education, and students are ready for a system that truly reflects that. Totally, in essence, the business of education needs to move beyond just business. It should be about igniting the student passions, fostering their individuality, and preparing them for a super rapidly changing world. Teachers are struggling to do this, not because their inability or incapability of doing it, but rather because the work doesn't reflect their needs as the conduit of that instruction and their desires. The students that we work with truly believe that we can work together to reshape this system and build a future where they and every student can thrive.
That's beautiful. I think what, thank you both, because I think what you heard is that the desire for change is unified across teachers and parents and students, and some of the motivations may be different, but the core purpose is to make sure that all students can thrive. And so that's just a beautiful thing to hear across this. Now we're going to turn to some of the Our Turn student fellows to ask some questions of all of us. And we thought we should flip this on its head. Usually students are getting a lot of questions from teachers, and we thought it would be fun for you to be able to grill us right back. So we'll turn it over to our Turn fellows to introduce yourselves and ask some questions.
Hi, my name is Bolu. I'm an Our Turn fellow, and I'm currently a student at Texas A&M. My first question is, the survey outlines a lot of key issues that teachers want to see addressed in their classrooms and their schools. Where should we start, and how do we build a consensus around that? I'd love to hear from Assistant Secretary Rodriguez first.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate the question, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation with our young people, with our students, right? That main consumers are students and our parents and families of the work. So it's got to start, it really has to start with marshaling the will to make change. You know, you've heard a lot about the data here, right? But it's about how do we help to support, first and foremost, I would say, the compensation that our teachers need and deserve, right? If we're gonna raise the bar, we have to do a better job of making sure that our teachers aren't paying an invisible tax relative to their other college-educated peers, right? That they're not earning, right now, less than 75 cents on the dollar relative to their other graduates. And, I'm excited. This is in red states and blue states. We are seeing progress here. We are seeing, over 26 states that over the last couple of years have raised teacher salaries. They're not where we need to be yet, but that is a really important part of this equation. I think we have to do more to help excite, engage, and prepare a generation into the teaching profession and into our classroom. a generation that looks different than I do, and different than my experience was, you know, working in teaching our high school students when I first came out of college. Looks a lot different than my parents as public school educators, right? Because the economy and the opportunities that our educators have and that our graduates have, you know, we have to provide them better pathways, and we have to invest in them early, right? Again, through these types of residencies and grow your own programs and teacher apprenticeships. You know, I'm very proud of the work that's underway across the country to reimagine and rethink that experience, and to provide those early mentorships so that our veteran teachers and our experienced teachers who have that wisdom and that knowledge can be intentionally paired and support their success. And then I think, you know, the third thing that we need to do is we need to tackle the structure that is right now, in too many cases, limiting our teachers' leadership, voice, contribution, just the four walls of their classroom, right? And you know, this is about what we heard so eloquently here from our students and from our parents, which is that we have to reimagine the system so that it matches the aspirations of our young people, and so that it matches our aspirations of our teachers. So imagine if we did that. It would mean that our teachers are collaborating in real time as teams. They're not at it alone, as Susan said, right? They're not going at this just with one teacher. It means that they are, you know, recognized with differentiated roles and responsibilities and compensation structures to match that effort. You know, it means that they are working alongside their principal and advising and contributing to the conversations that their district is having around what instruction looks like, what curriculum looks like. It means that they are supported with other adults in the lives and learning of their students, and they're connecting and collaborating with those other adults, whether those are social workers or psychologists or others that are brokering the experiences and opportunities that our young people need, right, to be healthy and to grow and to thrive in and out of school, because we know those out of school time and out of school hours matter to their ability to do well in school. So those structural changes will take more time, but we have to get underway. We have to approach that charge with an innovative, optimistic, and open spirit for how to drive change in our schools. And we need to elevate the places that are doing this well. And I will say, you know, I am certainly optimistic and hopeful about these results, because I know that there are schools that are getting this work done. Our challenge is to scale that across the country.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Now, I am not a teacher. I'm Matthew, Miles, and David's mom. But what I keep seeing showing up in all of these conversations is, yes, money is important, but sometimes a paycheck isn't enough. You know, we also have to create the conditions so that teachers and our students are able to grow and thrive in classrooms without them being political battlegrounds. Like, I am deeply concerned when I hear about, you know, only 16% of teachers would recommend this profession, you know, to somebody else they care about, because, oh my gosh, you know, the mental load of wanting to enter into this profession when it is a political battleground right now, that's not okay. You know, it's one thing to get you into the classroom. How do we keep you there? Because we need you there. We need high quality educators to be leading classrooms and want to stay there and invested in our kids. So I know we're very committed to making sure that our classrooms across the nation are a safe place for kids to learn about, express, and celebrate their identities, that we can educate our children and focus on the job. I mean, 74% of our families think we have a literacy crisis right now. I want y'all thinking about that, not worrying about, oh my gosh, are they gonna come for me every 5 minutes about, you know, if I say a word that triggers, you know, a grown adult that it doesn't even half the time have a kid in some of these classrooms. So we gotta remove the politics, you know, and allow you guys to do your jobs, to go in there and not have this burden of the outside politics on top of the really important stuff we need you to do. So I know we're committed to making sure that you guys are heard about that, you're protected, and that we're creating the conditions so that you can do this important job we need you to do.
I think that's really valuable input. I think as a teacher, one of what you said really resonates with me because I am a teacher who goes above and beyond. Clearly, I'm here, right? I do a lot. I do most. But she says that's what makes me a good educator. I work in a really strong school with a strong administration. However, I still only hear what I need to improve, what I'm doing wrong, when a parent's upset with me, when those kind of things. And to carry that burden is really challenging. And I think that's one thing is like just having that community where we are appreciated for the work that we're giving, because we're not just teachers anymore, right? We're mental health workers, we're social workers, we're parents. Like my parents tell my students, that's your school, Mom, you better do what she says, right? Like that's where we're at in this world right now, right? Like I'm involved in what's happening in their homes, we're communicating all the time. And I think that's really, really important that people see what the work we're really doing beyond just teaching. And I also think giving our parents voices is really important. I think for us this year, in North Minneapolis, we have lost our assistant principal because we don't have enough students to have an assistant principal anymore. And the argument is that, well, on the south side, those schools don't have it, but then we say, well, on the south side of Minneapolis, they don't need that because they're not facing the same trauma, the same hostility, the same violence that our students are. We have those needs. So our parents were outraged. So we said to our parents, come speak, right? And they're like, why would somebody want to hear from me? I'm not college educated. Y'all do your thing and you're in charge. We trust you, And so we said, come. And so our parents started to speak at our school board meetings, right? And they started to think, and we're still fighting the battle. Maybe Lucilini should have their assistant principal because they're showing this need and they're showing how they use that assistant principal. So our parents are really starting to get involved, but we've had to push them to that point. And I think that's one thing that is really valuable for the families that I work with in North Minneapolis.
Great. Next question.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cameron Williams. I'm a recent graduate of Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm also a senior organizing fellow with Our Turn. I just wanted to first uplift all the voices and anecdotes of our educators here on the panel as well as in the room. Some of my most impactful mentors in life have been educators and have really guided me to the place that I am today. So really just wanted to echo the sentiments as you all gave value to some of the statistics that we see. And with that, I think when I envision how we move forward within the educational space, I think of developing these symbiotic relationships within schools. And so oftentimes we might ask, like, what do students need from teachers to better support them, but we never ask what happens on the flip side. And so I wanted to direct my question towards Carrie and Kevin specifically and talk about what support can parents as well as students provide to teachers so that they're able to be and show up as their best selves.
When I think of how students can support teachers, don't kick me out the room. Let's just level set here for a second, right? If there were no students, there would be no schools. Because they're the primary customer, the primary client. We're on Capitol Hill, the primary constituent user of that product, right? But the education system is one of the only, if not the only, sort of business that doesn't take user experience into mind when they're designing the product. And then doesn't take into the experience of the deliverer of the product who says, I'm hearing from the consumer and I know how to change it because I'm with them every day. Here's how we should deliver it. And then those in the ivory tower of this system say, no, we're gonna do it the way that we said. Imagine if, these folks said that, they'd be out of business. All these tech companies and such, if they didn't put the user experience voice into consideration with that design. So when I think about how students can help teachers, it's really reclaiming the power that they have in their voices. Because if students can start to stand up and shake and knock at the door of the system and say, hey, this is not what we want or what we need, and do that collectively, right? And that can permeate the system across this nation, I think then the system will have to respond. And if the system responds, then they will have to do that through the conduits of that system, who are the teachers, which means that the conditions for the teachers will have to change. But that starts with students reclaiming their power. The education system has created this terrible power dynamic that says, stay in a child's place, do as I say, not as I do. You have no power, you are the recipient of this only, right? And as a result of that, so few students actually speak up. So sure, we can bring teachers apples and we can write them nice notes and tell them, hey, you're doing a great job, but the conditions will remain the same. But when and if students start to say, hey, this is wrong, we don't like this, we need better, do better, we're not gonna do this way, and we do this as a collective, and we're not afraid that we're gonna get suspended, kicked out, banished, expelled, etc. We're not afraid of that because we understand our collective power. The system will change, teachers will be better off, and then students will be better off.
I think a lot of my answer would be very much in the same vein. You know, I think we have to be united in our collective will to turn our relationships with each other from being transactional to transformational. I think what we lose in a lot of these conversations is the understanding that parents often are the underserved students of the previous generation. So when we show up, you know, in that classroom, you know, we show up with our dukes up. I know I do. I got expelled from school. You know, so I'm ready to fight. What are you going to do with my baby? And so, you know, in order to break that down, because you need us, you need students, you need us to be part of the team if we're actually going to get to the outcomes and get to that economic mobility that we want for all of our babies so that they have a better life, because that's why I'm in this. You know, so I would say, like, we got to negotiate kind of a peace treaty here and kind of put things down and say, listen, like, hurt people, right? And you are showing up in this classroom. We know, and we're going to assume positive intent that we're going to have a renewed effort to have a good relationship here. But we've got to acknowledge that there's been some past harms. But I think that if we're able to do that and we can build that trust, parents are right there and want you to be successful. I have a vested interest in your success, you know, because without you, my child is never going to get to that third grade proficiency that I now know he desperately needs to get to keep him out of the school to prison pipeline. I want that, you know, and us being in a fight, we're not going to make progress to that. So I think that, you know, we really have to double down, and even in some of the data that we're seeing here, like 70% of teachers are saying that they're deeply concerned about, you know, where kids are academically. I can show you a survey that says 70% of American families, maybe 80%, think we're doing okay. That would say to me that we're not talking to each other. We got a communication problem. So we have to double down on fixing that so we are all on the team. But it comes with respect, like in giving every one of us as critical stakeholders that respect. Because you can't just do things to us or make assumptions about who we are and what we care about. And you really got to engage us in a meaningful way. We need some human being lessons, you know, in this so that we can all collectively kind of move forward.
I also think the role that parents have, and I know especially when I come to the lens sometime I'm from the Caribbean, and I think so many times immigrant parents do not know how to navigate the system. It's a very sophisticated system, and so therefore, I think providing the role, letting parents know their own power. What is it your power? What is it that you know? I know especially in special life, for instance, oftentimes children sometimes don't get the adequate service, and they don't know what question to ask. They don't know how to navigate the system. So I think the role is for for parents to know, what is it my power? What is it that I need in which to help me navigate the system? I know at one point in St. Paul Public School, we had a class where we had parent empowerment, where we really take the time in which to say, let me teach you about the school system. So you can see how to help teachers and how teachers can better serve you. In the book Culturally Relevant Teaching, and in the area of the student perspective, one of the things that she said is that teachers need to get the voice of student. And one of the things she suggests is that maybe once a week or once a month, get a collective group of students, and maybe it doesn't have to be your brightest student, maybe even the worst student that you have in your classroom. Have them sit down and ask them, how is my teaching? What is it that you need from me so you can progress? And so I think when we need to start having honest conversation with students and not just hearing them, but really listening to understand them. And not just hearing them, but then using what they say to help guide our practice. Then I think we can help bring about effective change in education. Because their voice matters in the space, right? And again, without them, where would we be? So we need to listen to what they have to say. Them and their parents come alongside with us because it's not an individual thing, it's a partnership. So in order for the school system to change, we need to hear all the voices in this space as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zane McCorby. I'm a social science third-year scholar at Jackson State University, which is HBCU, but also I'm a community and culture fellow at our turn. But my question, I really want to ask the educators, as a future educator, as someone who believes, the power of education and coming from parents who are educators, the pandemic blurred the lines between home and school, while also severely impacting student engagement, mental well-being, and achievement. How do we get schools to a place where they are simultaneously welcoming and flexible in recognition of increased challenges for students, while also being productive learning environments where students are held accountable?
How much time do we have?
Yeah, that's a tall order. And I think it's a question that I'm still reflecting on, right? I'm still trying to process for what can I do to kind of get students back on track, and what exactly is that track, right? The pandemic blurred those lines, and it's like school in some people's minds right now became optional. Because if you really look at it, right, a lot of my students might say to me, well, I need money to get X, Y, and Z thing. School's not giving me that money, so I'm gonna go get a job, and that's gonna be my priority. And I'm gonna do it, just enough, do the little things you're giving me, because it's cute and all, I wanna pass the class, but they're not necessarily seeing like an intrinsic value in that, right? And so it's my job to reflect on that and go, okay, I know I have a curriculum. I know that a lot of really smart, I'm a science educator, a lot of really smart science educators sat down and went, this is what students should know, and I'm trying to make sure that they know it. But I really do need to connect those dots a little bit more and make sure they know, okay, why do we need to know this information? And yes, some of it is, you're not gonna see this again, you just need this for the test, you just see this for my class. And so if I can advocate for some of those things to go, yeah, we don't necessarily need to do this part, maybe we should take this out, and maybe we should make sure that what we are teaching is useful and is useful for students to progress in their lives and to move forward, because I think that is the goal, right? It's wherever you started, you should learn information from me, you should have background knowledge that you can apply to whatever situations come up in your life. And no, I'm not gonna take the excuse of you're not gonna be a biology teacher or a doctor to say you don't need this. You never know what you need, so you do need that baseline information. There's, not to throw shade, but there's politicians out here, I'm like, you didn't pay attention to science class. Why are we having this conversation right now? You clearly needed it, and you were like, oh, I'm gonna do what I like. No, you need everything at the baseline. But beyond that, I wanna make sure that my students are making progress, and that looks like a partnership. That looks like them telling me what it is that they need, where they think they might be heading, and building that bridge between the two things of, how do I get you to grow as an individual with your time with me? So that's what I see as my role in that.
Thank you, Janelle. I can piggyback on that. It was a great question, and welcome to the field of education. It's fantastic. Congratulations. So don't let this get you. Can we start with just stop ignoring that the pandemic happened? Right? Like a lot of people just kind of like, well, no, that was a while ago, and these kids they can bounce back, and kids are strong, and kids are able to just kind of like rubber balls, kind of bounce against the wall and be back to where they were. And that's not true. And I think our lived experiences, all of our lived experiences, can kind of relate to that. So if you're sitting here and telling me that a kindergartner was, displaced during COVID and had some issues and disruptions in learning and socialization, all those things, how can you sit here and tell me 4 years later that they're not impacted by that, right? Their story, and maybe it's the history teacher in me, but there's a through line here. And to ignore that where they're stopped and they had that issue is to ignore what they're dealing with right now. And it's not based in facts, it's not based in reality, just based on what we wish was reality as opposed to what is reality. And I think what comes to my mind, and I heard Janelle use the word too, value, but 2 words, authentic and valuable, right? I teach in New York State, we're still a regions-based state, which means that students have to pass a certain number of state tests to even graduate high school. Most of these state tests haven't been updated, in 20, 30, 40 years. Okay, the history teaching might have been updated, but it doesn't truly reflect authentic and valuable learning experiences. I'm an adjunct professor. I teach electricians. Most of the time, they're like, what are we doing history for? Well, let's just talk about other things. Let's talk about what's going on in your life. Let's figure out how we can use this education, this classroom moment, to impact you outside this classroom. So when you make those valuable experiences, when you recognize that our students had to work, I worked in the South Bronx during the pandemic. My students, by far, needed to work during the pandemic, needed to help keep their bills paid, their TVs on, their fridges on, the food on the table, all these things they had to do. How are we to ignore that? Because if you ignore that, you then ignore what they're dealing with right now. Having the issue of like, well, I know I can get by Mr. Gannon's history class, I can show up, get my 65 pass my regions and move on, but I can also make money and get myself moving at 18, 19, 20 years old. That is real. And to say that that student or any student doesn't deserve to have that belief and want to go down that path kind of betrays what education is about. Education is about finding your path, finding your journey in life, whatever that journey happens to be, whatever school you go to, whatever you choose to do, teaching electricians, whatever you want to be. We can't ignore what their lived experiences are because we can't help them grow. And everything else stems from that. Classroom mismanagement, lack of students coming to school. Why is that? It's not because they hate school, it's because they recognize the value and the time they're putting into that isn't really reflecting what they're receiving. So if we ignore the pandemic and we say, well, that was a while ago, forget it, we ignore what they're going through. So we need to just kind of reconnect to that conversation and not forget it.
Okay, I know that there's more questions. I also know they're going to kick us out of this room in about 5 minutes. So I just want to make sure that we wrap this up. So first, I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank Assistant Secretary Rodriguez, who had to leave, and thank our teacher leaders so much for their contributions to this. What I'm leaving this conversation hearing is that what is missing is the collective political will that can only come from students and parents and teachers being locked arm in arm, calling for the same type of change. And so hopefully today is a step in that direction, and the work that these incredible organizations are doing are building that in other communities across the country. To help close us out, I'm going to invite Corey Kane up, who is a Dean of Instruction in Chicago, for a closing call to action for this community. Thank you, Corey.
Hello. Wow. And I'm saying, I'm sure you guys are wild too, not by my black shirt, but by these comments.
It's pretty good.
Thank you. This is probably my 4th or 5th time coming to one of these, and I know as educators, we sometimes after spring break think our next break is not until summer. For me, it's coming here, right? Every time I come, I'm just like, I'm revitalized by the things I hear. It's a blessing and a curse because I know I'm with wonderful educators who go out there and do the work that we do, but also the data, right? For me, and just really quickly what happened to me, I was telling Janelle that I recently suffered from a sty. It was covering my eye. I called home and I complained. And we heard about complaining today. My mom said, well, I told my mom, I can't see in my eye. She goes, use the other one. And today, and for me, I tied it into, my mom was always, trying to tell me these parables. I think it was a parable for me to think about looking at it from a different perspective. I'm a D of instruction, and I haven't taught in classrooms since 2015. That's how old I am. And when I talk to teachers and I hear them, say these things and complain about things, before I used to listen to respond, like, I used to be a teacher, do it this way. I have not taught after the pandemic. I don't know what it's like to do that. Today it's about listening to understand. Not only do we have this anecdotal evidence, we have stats to back it up. Teachers are really suffering in the classroom, kids suffering in the classroom. And I know I spoke to the congressman, I heard the congressman speak, and I spoke to the assistant secretary. And the one thing I heard is something my mom used to tell me, don't talk about it, be about it. We now have the information we can talk about. It's time for us to now be about it. So, just so you know, at the conclusion of this event, we, as teachers, are going to speak to different Congress people here on the Capitol, and we're gonna be sharing this information with them. We're not gonna just talk about it, but we're gonna be about it. So I also wanna leave that with you. So if you can, real quick, to say with me, don't talk about it, be about it. I'm glad you said that, so here's what I want you to do. All right, there are two things I want to share with you as a call to action for you to go out and be about it. All right, first, leverage teacher perspective in policy decision making. Use this report as a tool to ensure that sweeping change teachers have long been promised is delivered. Second, bridge the research to practice gap in order to support reimagination of profession. As a dean of instruction, I use this type of data at my school. I share it with my administrators, and we're not only talking about it, we're being about it. Our teachers who say things like, hey, we're being asked to do things outside the classroom. Well, guess what? We pay them now, right? We hear them, we respond. This is about responding, okay? As we build modern classrooms, we need evidence of what works and what doesn't. And we need the evidence to make it into the hands of school leaders. I'm holding you all responsible. Thank you so much.